I used to think the worst part of that night was what I saw. Now I know it was what I didn't see until much later. My name is Claire. I'm 32 now, and when I was 10 years old, I spent one night alone in my parents' house that changed the way I understand silence, space, and how easily something can be inside your life without you noticing. It was supposed to be simple. My parents had gone out for the evening. Nothing unusual, just a few hours, and I had stayed home alone before. They left food in the fridge, told me not to open the door for anyone, and said they'd be back before midnight. The house was quiet in the normal way at first. The kind of quiet you don't notice because it feels safe. I watched television, moved between rooms, turned lights on and off without thinking about it. Around 9, I started hearing something I couldn't place. It wasn't loud enough to be obvious. Just a small, irregular sound somewhere deeper in the house, like something shifting slightly and then stopping. At first I ignored it, assuming it was the building settling or pipes moving the way they sometimes do at night. But it kept happening, not in a pattern I could follow, just often enough that I started listening for it without meaning to. I remember turning the television volume down and sitting there, trying to hear it again, and when I did, it sounded closer than before. That's when I got up and checked the house. Every room looked exactly the way it should have. Nothing out of place, nothing missing, no signs that anyone else was there. I checked the doors, the windows, even the closets, the way children do when they're trying to convince themselves everything is normal. Everything was locked. Everything was still. So I went back to the living room and turned the volume back up. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't, because a few minutes later, I heard something else. Breathing. Not loud, not close enough to locate, just present. I froze without realizing it, the kind of stillness that happens before you understand why you're afraid. I held my own breath for a moment, and that's when I realized it wasn't coming from me. It was slightly delayed, like whoever it belonged to wasn't trying to hide it, just didn't need to. I told myself it was my imagination, that it had to be. There was no other explanation that made sense. So I did what people always say you should do. I called my parents. They didn't answer. I left a message, trying to sound calm, trying not to let it show in my voice that something felt wrong. After that, I stayed where I was, sitting on the couch, watching the hallway without really watching it, just waiting for time to pass. That's when the sound changed. It wasn't just breathing anymore. It was movement, not coming toward me, moving somewhere else in the house, like it was choosing where to be. I remember thinking that if someone had broken in, they would be searching, making noise, doing something obvious. But this wasn't like that. This felt patient. I stood up slowly and walked toward the hallway, not because I wanted to, but because staying still felt worse. Every step made the house feel quieter, like the air was holding itself back, and when I reached the hallway, I stopped. The light at the far end was on. I didn't remember turning it on. I stared at it for a long time, trying to recall if I had been down there earlier, trying to find a reason for it that made sense. I couldn't. Then I heard it again. Behind me. Closer this time. I turned around too quickly, expecting to see something. Anything. But there was nothing there. The living room looked exactly the same as it had before. The television still on, the door still locked. But the air felt different. Like I wasn't alone in it anymore. I went back to the couch and sat down, pulling my knees up without realizing it, trying to make myself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. That's when I noticed something that didn't make sense. The reflection in the television. It wasn't clear, just a faint image of the room behind me, but something about it was wrong. At first I couldn't place it, and then I realized what I was seeing. There was a shape behind me, standing where there should have been nothing. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because in that moment, I understood something that made everything worse. If I turned and it was gone, I would have to convince myself I imagined it. But if I turned and it was still there, then it had been there long enough to decide not to hide. I stayed still, and after a few seconds, the shape in the reflection moved, just enough to change its position, like it knew I had seen it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't someone trying to get in. It was someone who had already been inside. The front door never opened. No windows broke. No alarms went off. Nothing that would have warned me. I don't remember how long I sat there, but eventually, the sound of a car outside broke the silence. My parents. I heard the door unlock, heard their voices, and in that moment, the breathing stopped. Completely. I turned around immediately. There was nothing there. No one in the room. No movement. No sound. My parents came in, asked if I was okay, and I told them everything. They checked the house the same way I had, room by room, door by door, and found nothing. They told me I had scared myself, that it was just being alone, that the house was empty. For years, I tried to believe them. I told myself that memory changes things, that fear fills in gaps, that what I saw wasn't real. Until I found something. It was years later, after my parents had moved out, and I went back to help clear the house. I was packing things in the living room when I noticed marks on the floor behind where the couch used to be, like something had been standing in the same place for a long time, facing the exact spot where I had been sitting that night. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it meant nothing, but then I remembered the reflection, and something else, something I didn't understand back then. The breathing wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't moving through the house. It was always behind me, close enough that I should have felt it, close enough that it never needed to move at all. And that's the part that still doesn't let me sleep. Because if it was standing there the entire time, then it wasn't trying to find me. It was already where it wanted to be, and it stayed until it decided it didn't need to anymore.